Hello, everyone. Welcome back inside the UC Health Training Center for another episode of Broncos Now. Team reporter and host Sydney Jones here. And coming up on today's episode, we'll take a look at some of the potential moves the Broncos could make in free agency. All that and more coming up. Free agency is set to begin next week with the start of the NFL's new league year on Wednesday, March 15th at 2 p.m. Mountain Time. Though teams will be allowed to negotiate with unrestricted free agents prior to that during the 48-hour legal tampering period that will begin on Monday, March 13th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. As a reminder, the NFL salary cap this year is set at $224.8 million per team, and that is a $16.6 million increase from last year. So joining me here on today's episode of Broncos Now to take a look at some of the potential moves the Broncos could make in free agency next week is fellow Broncos reporter Phil Milani. Phil, pleasure to have you on the show again today. Thanks for joining me in the studio.
Thanks, Sid. I missed you when you guys were out of the combine.
I know. We missed you too.
I was hanging back here just by myself.
You didn't miss much. Well, Phil, there's a lot to get to, so we'll get right to it. I feel like the big area of need that's really been the main talk this offseason for the Broncos is the offensive line. We heard from General Manager George Paton at the Combine, and he said, they need to upgrade on the offensive line. And, an area that they could really do that is at right tackle. And if you look at some of the potential free agents this year, I feel like there's a lot of former first-round right tackles available. According to Pro Football Focus, the top 3 free agent right tackles are Mike McGlinchey with the San Francisco 49ers, Juwan Taylor with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Caleb McGarry with the Atlanta Falcons. Phil, what do you know about some of those guys, and what do you think they could bring here?
I think a guy like Mike McGlinchey is interesting just because he was a top 10 pick coming out of Notre Dame in 2018, but maybe some injury concerns. He had that torn quad in 2021. Got back to form last year. He's like a perfect fit for what Kyle Shanahan likes to do there at 49ers. One thing I'll be sort of interested to see is what kind of blocking scheme Sean Payton wants to use up there to see if maybe a guy like McGlinchey will be a good fit. I think that the thing about Sean Payton is he will put his players in the best position to succeed. So, but when he has a choice to pick a player, will he go with that scheme? So Mike McGlinchey, a good fit for that wide zone. I know that you like Juwan Taylor.
I do. Florida grad.
A Florida guy.
I have to.
He's really super durable. PFF, Pro Football Focus, says that he allowed a pressure on 2.5% of his dropbacks. So really good pass protector. And considering Russell Wilson was sacked so many times last year, I think he was tied for the most sacks in the league, 55, I think it was. They got to protect him a little bit better. And when Sean Payton went to New Orleans, the offensive line was a major area that they revamped his first year. So I bet he's taken a long look at this offensive line. They know that they got to add some players there. And I think right tackle makes a lot of sense.
Yep, I think so too. Looking at some other positions on offense, Phil, that the Broncos could, target in free agency, running backs. George Paton did talk about at the Combine about Javonte Williams, that will be healthy. They're expecting for him to start the season, and he's been doing really well in his rehab, but they want to, be safe rather than sorry. So they looking to add maybe a back or two just in case he's not ready for the start of the season. So, looking at some of the free agents, what running backs do you like that are out there?
That's going to be a really interesting position because George Paton did say that they want to add to that position. So they want to add a running back. You think about what happened last year with Javonte Williams, so much hype about his second season in the NFL. You think that he's going to take this huge step and be like a dominant kind of guy. He goes down with a terrible injury. Melvin Gordon has his fumble issues. They have to release him. Mike Boone gets hurt. This is a position that you need a lot of depth there.
Agreed.
And, like the running back room, they were lucky that Latavius Murray was able to come in and produce the way that he was able to because they had Marlon Mack there. Chase Edmonds even got hurt once he got here. So this is a lot of attrition at that position. So they're going to add there. It'll be interesting to see if they do this in free agency or in the draft because the draft is really deep at running back. But if you're talking about potential free agent guys, a guy who jumps off the page, Jamal Williams out of Detroit, broke Barry Sanders' record last year, 17 touchdowns. The one thing I get a little bit nervous about with some of these guys is the fact that if you're coming off of a career year, what are the chances that you're able to repeat
Do it
that?
again. Yeah.
Do it again.
I agree.
You want to find like a free agent who's on the rise in their career that you're going to get the best years out of them, and not guys who've already had their best years. So it's sort of a tricky spot. You don't want to overpay a guy there who's coming off of a really great season. But if you think a guy like Jamal Williams is still like that was just the tip of the iceberg, then you go ahead and do that. I'm just interested to see if they want to spend money there or if they want to get a young guy from a draft. But I like Jamal Williams. I think Miles Sanders is like the top guy there from the Eagles, but I'd be surprised if they let him get out of Philly there.
Yeah, he had a good year last year.
Yeah, more than 1,200 yards, a lot of like explosive runs there. So I know that other top guys, Damian Harris, Devin Singletary, those are like the kind of players maybe the Broncos could be looking at there. And then, of course, the name that was associated with the Broncos from NBC Edge, Matthew Berry, their fantasy guy, he heard maybe a Kareem Hunt could be in the mix there. So I'll have to see if a guy like Kareem Hunt makes sense for this Broncos locker room, if they want to go in that direction. A guy who's split carries with Nick Chubb in Cleveland the last several years. So you wonder, hey, does this guy still have enough talent there, enough production still left? Maybe he does. We'll have to just see what they do.
Yeah. You mentioned, it is a deep running back class for the draft. Maybe they add guys in both free agency and in a later round of the draft.
Exactly. Maybe you get like a lower level guy in free agency and then bring in a guy from the draft. I think that would make sense too. And I think younger makes a lot of sense with running back.
With running backs, for
guy who doesn't have as much miles under his legs. I think that you can get more out of somebody like that. And where the Broncos are picking in the third round, there's still going to be some really good running backs there if they want to go that route. But you think about Sean Payton. They've had a lot of really talented running backs there in New Orleans that they use a lot. Use them in the passing game, use them in the running game. So it does seem like Sean likes to have a guy like that. If they go out and get one of these big names, maybe that'll tell you how they're feeling about Javonte Williams. So I don't know. That's a tricky spot for me.
You say, you would want to look to bring in a younger running back, but hey, look at Latavius Murray and how well he did this past season.
That's true. There's something to be said for a vet. Yeah, that's right.
I agree.
That's right.
Well, Phil, Pro Football Focus, they also have a list of top free agents, based on each team's needs. So when looking at Denver's needs, the top two on their list, they have Eagles defensive tackle Javon Hargrave and Buccaneers linebacker Levante David. Of course, the defense, played at a really exceptional level last year and really the past couple years. But, they're always going to look to add talent. What do you know about those two guys specifically since they're at the top of the list there?
I think that when you look at the Broncos, like a website like that will say, okay, Draymond Jones is a free agent.
Right.
Alex Singletary's a free agent. So maybe they have to bring in some help there. So maybe that's why they identify those two guys. Look, Javon Hargrave is like maybe the top free agent overall, regardless of position available. Greg Rosenthal at NFL.com has him at number one. 11 sacks last season, 7.5 sacks the year before that. The thing about him, though, is he's going to require a lot of money. 16 to $18 million a year probably for somebody like that. It'll be interesting. He has 7 years under his belt, so he's got some experience coming in. But that interior defensive line position, that's like the hottest position in the NFL. Like you want to be able to disrupt the passing game from the middle of the defensive line. So if you can find a guy there who could be a game wrecker, then that's why they're demanding so much money. So I think Javon Hargrave is going to be one of the top names. Obviously, when you play on a defense like the Eagles, you're going to get a lot of attention too. So I think that's why he's the number one guy out there. I'm not sure if the Broncos are going to swing that big. So we'll have to see, though. Maybe they really like him and they make it happen. Levante David, that is an experienced guy, 11 years in the league. I think he benefits from the fact that Bobby Wagner had so much success with the Rams last year. People at the Seattle obviously thought he wasn't worth that money. He goes to LA, has a great season. Levante David could sort of fit that same mold, come in like a year or two deal, $10 million a year, that kind of a guy. 124 tackles last year in Tampa. a really smart player, but you just wonder if is that athleticism still there? A former All-Pro kind of player, but that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
So, but I think inside linebacker is one of those positions, though, where if you're a step or two ahead because you diagnose what the offense is doing, you can still be a really effective player there. So I think that will really depend upon what the Broncos do with their own free agents, though.
Right. Mentioned Bobby Wagner. I mean, he's a free agent too. Oh,
could be a fit. Yeah,
right.
Obviously connection there with Russell Wilson.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think it's going to really depend on how much money they want to, put to each position,
right.
what they want to do there, and just sort of how big do they want to go in free agency? Do they feel like they're a couple of pieces away from getting into the mix, getting back in the playoff picture a little bit? Or do they feel like, look, we got a lot of rebuilding to do here. Let's get some mid-level guys and continue to build this thing up. It's going to be an interesting week next week.
Yeah, I think so too. Well, last one here for you, Phil. How do you think the Broncos address the secondary? Do you think they'll look to add throughout free agency? Safety Kareem Jackson, he's an unrestricted free agent, so who knows? Yeah,
I mean, the Broncos defense, like you mentioned, really good last year. Do you want to be able to rely on the defense to stay that good? Vance Joseph comes in. He's running that defense now. I could see them going out and getting a guy like Von Bell. He's been connected to the Broncos on NFL.com. I think they said would be a good fit here. A guy, obviously, who knows Sean Payton from New Orleans. Spent the last couple of years in Cincy, but before that was with New Orleans. A tight end stopper, a run stopper. He's that kind of a safety that could pair really well with Justin Simmons. So I get the connection there. I think that it'll depend on what they want to do with Kareem Jackson. It'll depend on where they think Caden Stearns is as he's working his way back from injury. But you want that secondary to still be really dependable. You want that secondary to be a really solid unit. And so if you want to move on from Kareem, I think that a guy like Von Bell makes a lot of sense. Somebody who's familiar with Sean Payton and the way he likes to run the team. I do think that you heard Sean Payton talk about culture a lot when he was in Indy.
Yeah.
I think it'll be interesting to see if he wants to bring any Saints players to Denver because they already know what the expectations are from Sean.
That's a good point.
The message can be delivered in the locker room. It's a little different when it comes from player to player versus when it's constantly the same message is coming from the coaching staff. Sometimes it's better when it's coming just within the locker room from player to player. So if you bring in a guy who's played in New Orleans before, maybe his message can get delivered a little bit in a different way. So
yeah, that's a good point.
I do think that maybe bringing in a Saints player here or there could make a lot of sense too.
Yep. Well, Phil, it's like you said, I think next week's going to be a really interesting week. Fun week.
Yes. Just with 5 picks in the draft, I think in the third round, you could still find some solid contributors.
I think so too.
That could play as rookies. But if you're looking for some game-changing type of players who in 2023 are going to make a big difference, it's going to have to come from free agency.
Yeah.
So George Payton said that they want to be aggressive in free agency. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how much they want to take that big swing or if they want to just continue to build because the Broncos, Sean Payton said there's dirt on everybody after a season like last year. You just win 5 games.
Right.
You gotta make some changes. And so if you want to do that, you're gonna have to get a lot of different players in here.
For sure. We saw him do that in New Orleans.
Exactly. Yeah. Revamp the whole roster. He said the new culture, it's not gonna be for everybody. So there's gonna be some changes here, and you just see if they want to spend a lot on just like 1 or 2 guys, or if they want to really spread it out and get some mid-level guys. And we'll know a lot more about this Broncos team next week.
Yeah, that's true. We'll be right back here talking about it.
Exactly.
Next Thursday.
I'm looking forward to it. It'll be exciting to just get the ball rolling a little bit.
It will be. Yeah. Well, Phil, appreciate your time and your insight.
Hopefully I didn't talk too much. I feel like I was talking a lot.
No, you were perfect. That was great.
Oh, thank you.
Well, that'll do it for today's episode of Broncos Now, Broncos Country. Thanks so much for tuning in. Make sure to follow the Broncos Podcast Network on Twitter and the Denver Broncos YouTube channel to stay up to date on all the latest episodes. I will see you guys right back here next week for another episode.